to really miss Harold. This is it, because if we were having this meeting a couple of years ago and planning it, we would say, well, who's the person who can wrap this up and give us advice about how to take all these incredible ideas and rich information that's been discussed today and help us synthesize it and know where to go from it? And we would have, in a heartbeat, said, Harold, let's call him up and see if he can do this. So I'm going to try to channel him. I will not do any of this with either the eloquence or intelligence that I think he would have brought to it. But I want to share at least some of the observations I was having. One, I think almost universally everybody said we need to redefine evidence. And maybe we need to stop using the word evidence and define it as knowledge. And within that, there are various forms of knowledge and evidence or that we want to build and use for continuous learning. I think that there was, powerful support, I think, for the conclusion that Lee and Frank had in their paper about the need to have a broader definition of what we consider credible as we move forward in this work. Now, I don't want to be Pollyanna. I think people raised the challenges then of trying to explain that you're not saying that there isn't a role for randomized experiments, that there isn't a role for trying to do research that tries to understand causality, but that at least in the realm of looking at complex interventions, nobody really knows how to do that. So it may be that we've set up a straw man there that can't be achieved. I think a second big observation that I had was that there is just an enormous gulf between our desire and appetite for knowledge about what works and what is effective and what really exists. I was impressed by the candor of both Raphael and Jim Shelton when they talked about, we don't really know very much, and we need to build the foundation for even getting information into the stuff that we're doing so that we can even hope in the future to look at whether we're being successful. And I think a lot of people said we got to start with the very basics of defining the very outcomes that we want to achieve. I was very struck by the comment of, when we talk about healthy neighborhoods, are we all thinking the same thing? What is a healthy neighborhood, and what are the components that we're trying to achieve there? And doing that, I think, is going to require us to build data systems, change the cultures, and Marianne talked about Glisson's work and organizational culture, and embracing learning for continuous improvement, and that's really where we want to get to. I think a third observation was that we need to pay equal, if not more, attention to the use of that information, if we could get it, by decision makers. And again, it's clarity about what we're trying to achieve, communication of the results and messages in very clear ways so people can understand what we're saying. Accessibility of that information. People talked about how we can use technology to make information more accessible about what we know, what works, and in what context. Clarity about what we know about what doesn't work, and more work about understanding the intersection of politics and knowledge. Why is it so difficult to use the knowledge about what it is that doesn't work to get things off the table? I mean, and that is true in everything that we do, right? And then I think we need to be careful that we don't over-rely on evidence or knowledge as a hedge against a fear of taking risks. And this is where we get to the real crux of risk-taking innovation versus knowledge of what works. So again, trying to be Harold, I was trying to think about, well, what are some next steps here that we can take collectively and individually? one is, I think, a big task about educating decision makers at all levels in the community, in programs, at the federal government, at the state government, about what is evidence. So someone made a point, and I think it's true, when people talk about gold standard, half the time they don't really know what they're talking about. I mean, they don't really have a concept necessarily in mind. The researcher who does that research knows what gold standard is. So, and I'm not sure we should be so defensive about saying it's not gold standard. I think, again, we got to be clear that there's lots of different avenues to get effective information. I think we have to, we need more rigor, and this is the next step, in learning how to implement. And a lot of people talk about understanding implementation and what works in implementation and how you take a powerful idea or a strategy and effectively implement it. And we need to do that rigorously. We also need to understand and assess how do you build community capacity, because essentially in a lot of the comprehensive efforts, we are trying to build community capacity, and we have notions about what it takes to build that community capacity, but we need to assess what works there. I think no one has suggested that randomized control designs work for complex initiatives, so it suggests to me that we need to put a challenge to our researchers and evaluators to say, are there new methodologies for looking at complex initiatives, for looking at the intersections of programs and looking at things that have multiple initiatives, and you know, how can we expand research and our research methodologies to meet the challenge of complex community initiatives? A couple more points, and then I'll be done. I think Ralph in the last panel, I think, challenged us really powerfully to move the conversation from evidence to learning, and to build into, again, the architecture of everything that we do a learning environment, and that is really probably going to get us the most bang for the buck. And I think my other points I've actually already made. I want to end with a quote that Lee started us with, which is that we use evidence as launch pads, not arrival points. And if we do that, then we'll be moving toward more robust learning in real time. So I view today, and I know the center views today, as the start of a conversation. I want to just briefly say what we think we're going to do with all of this, and it'll be evolving, and it'll be interested in all of your suggestions about where we go from here. We're going to publish the paper with a little more tinkering by Lee and Frank, hopefully not for 9 more months, but and I'll take that on as my task to make sure that they don't tinker too much. We've had the live stream of today's conversation, so hopefully we'll put that up on our web and make that available to people. I think we'll have to discuss whether there's something we can do to synthesize in a better way than I've just done all of the ideas that have come out of the conversation today. And then I think we're going to all continue these conversations, because I think this is really just the start of a really important conversation. I want to thank Frank and Lee for writing the paper. I want to thank all of our presenters who were really wonderful, and everybody who's been here. This has been as participatory as we wanted it to be. So we're really pleased. We feel like this is exactly what we wanted in Harold's honor. And so thank you all very much. We're going to, in a few minutes, have a reception and some cocktails, I think. So I hope everybody stays around for that. Thank you very much.